Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, there's an often unappreciated difference between quality of life and keeping somebody alive. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with, once again, as always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I am the host for this podcast where we talk to a wide variety of entertainment industry professionals and pick their brain not only about current projects, but issues in the industry, what inspired them to get started, and so very much more. You can find this podcast everywhere most podcasts are found, on places like Apple and Spotify, and you can also find them all archived over on YouTube at our YouTube channel at In the Seats. And as always, please don't forget to follow us on social media at either In the Seats or at It's Podcast One on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And finally, please don't forget to visit us over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, for all your latest and greatest festival coverage, movie reviews, so very much more, because we have events, we do watch-alongs, we got all sorts of fun stuff going on. But on today's episode, I talk with the director of The Cuban, Sergio Navarretta, and The Cuban is really a fascinating and really sort of poignant look at not only the state of elder care, but also the power of music and the power of making sure that we treat people with dignity. And it's a personal story for him, and it's one that'll hit on personal notes for you too, because it's that kind of film. But it's also got a lot of great music in it and some great performances, and I hope you check it out, as it is on all VOD platforms starting tomorrow. Tomorrow. But that's about it, and let's get to our talk.
I mean, just to kick it off, I guess obviously, first off, congratulations on the movie. I absolutely enjoyed it. And I mean, at least
Thank you.
I think it really is sort of a not only an important message, just how about how music plays such an important part of sort of our culture and our emotional well-being, but also in terms of the differences between in elder care of not just keeping people alive, but providing a quality of life. I'm kind of curious, walk me through sort of when you initially had this story come across your desk and why it decided, okay, I got to be the one involved in this.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was instrumental in developing the story, and I worked closely with my producing partners and with the writer Alessandro Piccione to develop the film. So it was very much an incredibly personal story. So, you know, I was eager to get back to doing that, because that's sort of how I'm used to working, is just really being involved at the inception, you know, at the script stage or even earlier. And in the case of this film, it really started with a dream that a young producer had that evolved into a short story. And then we took that short story and then just poured our hearts into it. And eventually developed a screenplay and then shot the movie. So that's it's a great luxury for a director to have that, because by the time I go to camera, I know these characters inside, outside, and I also have the fuel to push me through the challenging times, because it was an incredibly personal story. So it's, I think it's different than just coming on a show where you have a week to prep and you really don't know much about why the writers wrote what they wrote. And, you know, it's when you do these kind of projects, it's a different experience.
Well, and I love that you say that too, because I mean, a lot of people don't, at least from the outside looking in, don't necessarily understand the differences between something that you get to sort of work on and develop and sort of get attached to versus, you know, you're getting dropped in and you just have to do it. I mean, how does that kind of change your personal process? I mean, because I can imagine on a job where you just have to sort of jump in and do it, you're not necessarily happy with the end result sometimes. It's just a question of getting the job done and moving on to the next one.
Yeah. Well, I think in all cases, it's a team sport.
Yeah.
It's a collaborative art form, for better or for worse. It's just in this situation, I'm a bigger cog in a wheel. So I have a much larger role to play in terms of helping to shape characters and share ideas and develop the visual language. When I think in series, a lot of that is already established before the director shows up.
Mm.
So in this case, everything from the color on the wall to I don't know, the undershirt that the love interest Chris wears, or the headband or the necklace, all that goes through me. And it all sort of is part of the fabric of what ends up becoming the Cuban.
Now, I mean, it's an old joke, but they say 90% of the job is done in casting. Now, talk me through sort of ultimately deciding and trying to pitch Louis Gossett, this icon of acting, to be able to get to be in your movie.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if it's 90%. It's oftentimes an actor will show up for a week and 4 years and I'm still on this thing. So yes, but casting is extremely important, and what ends up on that screen is all that anybody really cares about. So when I started sort of envisioning this idea of a Cuban musician, I only saw Louis Gossett Jr. in the role. That's the honest truth. The Bono role for Shohreh Aghdashloo so these roles were written for the actors that eventually were cast in the movie, thank goodness. But we used any means possible to get to Louis Gossett Jr. Everything from reaching out to a mutual friend that we have in Toronto, to multiple emails, to the young producers chasing him down at TIFF. And eventually I ended up at his home in Malibu, and it was one of those quintessential moments that I'll never forget.
Hard sell, easy sell, because he works, but I can imagine he, is selective with the stuff that he wants to do.
Yeah, he is selective, and I think he just connected to the music, to the theme of the story. Our disconnect with our elders in society is something he talks about a lot, something I talk about a lot. Our collective guilt around long-term care and the way that it's all played out, especially now during the pandemic, is just it's in your face, and we have no choice but to deal with it.
No, absolutely. And I mean, it creates this sort of, I mean, on one end haunting, but on the other end really kind of joyful sort of moment, especially in the connection between Louis and I'm on his character, and it's just it's one of those things that you can't necessarily tell it just through dialogue. You have to sort of tell it not only through the music, but you have to tell it visually as well. When you're sort of crafting all these elements together, like what's the kind of, I mean, I'm looking for the right word to explain this, like, but what's the right mosaic that you're trying to put together? Because when I look at a lot of these scenes and I look at a lot of the sequences, it's very much, it's like it's part music video, part sort of wistful painting all at the same time.
Wow, thank you. Can I get that in writing?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I give a lot of credit to my team, to my cinematographer Ciliana. We spent many months together discussing that, just the ethereal nature of the disease of dementia, but also just something, as you were speaking, something dawned on me, which is, when my dad passed away at 71, suddenly around the same time that this project started, I realized that wouldn't it be amazing if we could choose our final days and how we want to spend them and really go out in a bang? And that was thematically a lot of the driver that pushed me to keep going with this project. So, our nursing homes are filled with heroes, with princesses, with former CEOs of large corporations, musicians, artists. What are their stories? Every time I'd walk through the halls of a nursing home and they had the pictures outside by the door to remind the patient, the person suffering from dementia and the caregivers and family that really struck me, and I realized that a lot of these stories will die with them, and so thematically, that's I think what I clung on to and what pulled me through.
Well, it's the importance to tell these stories and to have them listened to as well, because I mean, and again, it goes back to sort of the old traditions of storytelling. I mean, it was either, it was the painting on the wall, or it was through story, through talking to one another, which is something that this has, at least for me, highlighted how much that we lose sometimes.
Yeah, this is a long-standing tradition, and coming from Italian heritage and background, I'm really cognizant of that, and never take it for granted, or at least I try not to. But storytelling is what has lifted our spirits through our darkest hour, through this pandemic, right? And music as well. So those are, that's just a testament to how powerful these art forms really are. And that's why, like, for those reasons, I really want to continue to do projects that are meaningful, that have some kind of social impact, that tell some kind of, that reflect something about the human condition. Just to make a project for the sake of making a project just seems irresponsible in a way.
Yeah.
So, but it is, yeah, I mean, it is powerful. It's the combination of the images moving with the dialogue, the set design, the wardrobe, like it all plays part. It's all part of the tapestry of what ends up being the film that is really a work of magic. When you think about it, when it works on all your senses, and hopefully it will move people emotionally in one way.
I think it will, absolutely, because like you say, there is this marriage between the image and the music in creating this sort of palpable sense of being inside that kind of dementia. And I mean, I guess my next question is, because especially on movies like this, I'm always fascinated on how you pair the music with the characters. I've got to imagine it was probably a pretty painstaking process to be able to sort of find the right songs and get the right songs cleared.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of luck with this project, really, because I got the cast that I wanted. In the end, every last one. The music was written into the script. So I give a lot of credit to my music supervisors at Instinct Entertainment. They, our conversation started super early on, because when you're going to do a music project, the last thing you want, hello?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
The last thing you want to do is, have your heart set on a song or a track, and then find out that you can't have it. So in the case of this film, I mean, it was written into the script, and they got busy early on to try to get me those songs. So that was pretty incredible. And then we had the music in advance, which I used on set all the time.
Okay.
Yeah, that was extremely helpful. I used music therapy for myself and for the cast crew, and we were able to play music the whole way through as we were shooting.
On something like this, how much time do you get with your cast? Or is it just a question of they're coming in for X amount of days and you got to make the most of it? Like I'm always, because the chemistry sort of really did seem to mesh quite well, just in terms of the different relationships and how everyone sort of played off each other.
Yeah, I mean, that's really important. Some of it is intuitive. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it's I don't think it's anything that you can learn. I sort of learned early on to feel my way through life, and
Right.
because I started in music, that's kind of how I do it. So I really use my instincts, and I try to push beyond what you would imagine to be, the archetype of what you would think of a good guy, bad guy, villain, protagonist. Really cast against type, and really dig deep and think about who would bring the most to the role. And I had the pleasure of meeting Anna Golia right from the inception, and I spend a lot of time with her. So, you know, you get to know people's strengths and weaknesses and what buttons to push when. And and I think the writer Alessandra really drew from that as well. Knowing these actors personally, she could sort of really fill in those characters nicely. So that chemistry that you see is really, I think, the sentiments and feelings that the actors and certainly myself and the crew were feeling every day on set. So it's very authentic.
No, absolutely. And I mean, it's a rarity too, because it's just not something that, I mean, I don't want to say isn't allowed or not, you know, encouraged, but I mean, it's before, at least pre-pandemic, everything, especially about the entertainment industry, was so go, 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 go.
Yeah.
It never necessarily allowed the time to be able to let actors live with characters and to let them breathe and to let them sort of find their own way. And I mean, I think this film really does that quite well.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the beauty of independent filmmaking. Sometimes people forget about you. On my last film, we were at Deluxe, and they said, you know, we're building out a new floor in our building, take office there, and you know, you can do your offline cutting and whatever. And we ended up being, you know, for like 6 months, on and off, of course. But in those times where I do most of my creating, most of my thinking, and I think for the editor Jane as well, it really helps her kind of come back with fresh eyes and new perspective. And it wasn't until Guillermo del Toro came down and said, "I need this whole floor," and you know, they were doing Shape of Water, so that sort of put some pressure on us to wrap it up. But yeah, I mean, living with it for as long as you can is helpful. And I learned that from Giancarlo Giannini. I went to Rome. He was doing a film, and they would edit, and there was like 5 people crammed in a small room, and they're all smoking. I was like dying in there. And then every once in a while, they say, "Let's go for an espresso." And it was in those times where a lot of the debates would happen and discussions and fresh ideas. And then you go back in the cave, and you're able to create some magic, you know, in those moments. So it's not always the case. Sometimes you just get lucky.
Now, I mean, while this obviously is a music movie, I mean, in many ways, you could argue that like the art form of movies is something that combines so many different arts and so many different sort of elements. And I'm, from your perspective as a storyteller, as someone sort of leading the bus, as it were, how do you try to sort of find the delicate balance of them all? Because I mean, obviously we'll see some movies that will be heavy on story or heavy on the drama, but if there isn't that right click of music at the right time, it doesn't necessarily work as well as it should. How do you sort of intersperse the two to make that right balance for the story that you want to tell?
I think some of it is instinct, some of it is experience. And I think it's really an exercise of putting one's insecurities aside and letting the story tell itself. I know it sounds cliche, but it's trusting your team and not micromanaging. You know, when I did my first movie, it was a short film. It was like 40 minutes long on 35 millimeter. And I thought the director's job was to micromanage everything. And as you get older and more experienced, you get more comfortable in the role, and you realize that it's really empowering, you know, your craftspeople, the artists that work with you as part of the team, and communicating your vision as clearly as possible. And then they have to believe. They have to believe in you. They have to believe in the vision, and that's when I think it all sort of comes together. Obviously, you know, music is going to be vying for the front seat, and the performances are going to be vying for, you know, like everyone's given their all, wanting their work to be seen, right? Including the background performers, whatever. So my job, along with my editor, is really finding that balance. It's even in performance, a lot of if you notice Luis's, you know, his character is very nonverbal.
Yeah.
A lot of that is, you know, is shaped in editorial. It's like how much do we want him to speak and emote? How much, how nasty do we want the nurse to be? Within the spectrum of performance that I have and the options and choices, we're able to sort of make those calls in editorial. So yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, finding that balance is tricky, and sometimes you don't know because you're in the weeds of it, and you start to lose objectivity. So I think that's when test screenings are really helpful, or you start screening for your team and just show people the film and say, hey, what do you think?
Well, and you're right, because I mean, especially, I mean, this isn't giving too much away, but I mean, Louis does say one thing towards the end of the movie, and that's this big sort of dramatic moment, and it really kind of emphasizes sort of not just the importance of sort of embracing the stories that we would get from our elders and in elder care, but also sort of appreciating that sometimes these stories don't always have a happy ending, even if the person telling the story might want to put a happy ending on it, because it reminds us of the highs and the lows of life in general.
Yeah, well, listen, life is bittersweet no matter how you slice it, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of his perspective. There's certain cultures that celebrate, our transition when we pass from this life to the next. Other people mourn. In my tradition in southern Italy, it was so dramatic and so heavy where widows would throw themselves into the hole with the coffin. I mean, it's all that stuff, right, that we're battling against all the time, and just our awareness of our own mortality. Those are all things I think that are universal and a lot of us think about, but it's really where do we want to shine the light? There's someone like Luis lived an incredible life. It's like, what part of it do we want to focus on? We also find out about some of his dark past. It's so it's really what we choose to focus on, and in this story we chose to focus on the light and the positive.
No, and it's a beautiful thing. Now, I guess that kind of dovetails into my next question. If money wasn't an object, what would be the one dream project you would want to focus on?
I think I'm more and more interested in inspiring young people. So even though I did work on a large animation movie and swore I'd never do it again, I'm now thinking I may revisit that idea, only because creatively, sky's the limit. Right. And you can sort of create any environment, any world you want. You can have any camera move you want without limitation. Within the confines of time and budget, of course. But so I revisit that, and and who knows, maybe like something that challenges me that I'm terrified of is like Star Wars or doing like a massive superhero movie. I'm like terrified of that. So that's probably, knowing how my personality, I jump out of the airplane with no parachute. If I had the opportunity, I would totally jump in, blind, of course, and just surrender to that experience. That's yeah.
Now, just to put a bow on this, just to wrap it up, can you go back in your life and sort of think of either one movie or one moment that was sort of that where the light bulb went off in your head and went, okay, I want to be a storyteller. This is what I want to do?
Yeah, that's tough, man. There's so many there's so many films that just give you a little more and a little more, right?
Yeah.
It's really hard. I really love the movies of the 70s and part of the 80s, but I think movies like Rocky.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Inspired me because, especially when I heard Sylvester Stallone's story, like he was destitute, like just with nothing, no resources, no money, no one was giving him a leg up. He had to sell his dog. I mean, that kind of heart you can never fake, and it shows in the storytelling. It shows in the script and in the movie. So yeah, movies like that are obviously, not to use a cliche, or so everyone says The Godfather, but it is true. I mean, that did speak to me. It was so epic. And then movies like Superman, you know, like with Christopher Reeve, the original.
Well, and I mean, they're all films that have these really interpersonal and sort of genuine stories, but still manage to give us a little bit of spectacle at the same time. And I think your film actually does that a little bit as well. And I just wanted to say thank you again for the time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, David. I really enjoyed this, and it's a great way to start the day. You know, I wish I could have all my mornings start like this.
Well, thanks again, man.
Talk about movies, man. Talk about what we love, right?
Absolutely, man. It's at the end of the day, that's what we're here for, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
All right. Cheers, brother.
Thanks. Keep doing the good work, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Steve. Thanks.